Hello and welcome back to another episode from Custodes Central. So it's taken a little bit of time for the next video. We're trying to get a lot of test games in to get some good data instead of just kind of sticking all the way into theory land. So we're up to just under 20 games now in 10th. And to be honest, I wanted to do this video for a long time, but it's actually a lot of work trying to consider all the matchups, etc., and all the stratagems that they might use, and the kind of, the typical list that you might expect to see. So here we're going to do an in-depth dive into the Callidus Assassin and specifically the value of Reign of Confusion and the various matchups. So first of all, let's just have a look at what the Callidus Assassin is. It's an Imperial agent, it costs 115 points, and it will take one of the two character slots that you can take from Imperial agents. What it does have is it has lone agents, which is really useful. They can't shoot you outside of 12. You will have infiltrate, which means you can deploy it outside of your normal deployment zone as long as it's outside of 9 from your enemy's deployment zone and your opponent's infiltrate units. So to me, its primary function is to initially deploy it in a safe place to infiltrate, or it can just deploy somewhere on your board. But if it was in your own deployment zone, you might as well have it in deep strike, because the Reign of Confusion ability still expressly works even if the model is not on the table. The only place where the ability would not work is if you were stuck inside a transport, because I think that's how 10th works with abilities. The only place where your abilities don't really work is when you're inside a transport. So what is Reign of Confusion, if you don't know? This is what I call like the Vect ability. So if you hear other people talking about Vect, it's the same thing, just a different name of the ability. So once per battle, after your opponent uses a stratagem, this model can use this ability. If it does, until the end of the battle, CP cost for your opponent to use that stratagem again is increased by 1. So nothing happens the first time that they use it, but if they want to use it again, it's an additional CP cost. How this works with other abilities in the game, which are fairly common, which allow you to use a stratagem for 0 CP, and repeated, is basically the 0 will be counted as the substitution of the original CP cost of the stratagem, after which Reign of Confusion will be counted as a modifier, which would happen after the substitution. So if they wanted to use a 2 CP stratagem, that CP, they could use it for 0 CP, which gets modified now to 1 CP. So they now have to pay 1 CP for it instead of it being free. Or if they don't have any ability, you just do it on a 1 CP strat. Now it just costs them 2 CP to use it every time after the first time that they use it, after you trigger Reign of Confusion. So how would I deploy the Callidus Assassin? Here it really depends on how many primaries do you want to be on turn 1, and can they threaten your Callidus turn 1 if you don't go first, for example. Or even if you do go first, is it safe? Because they might have scouting units, they might have infiltrating units, they might just have very fast moving units. So the thing that you really want to think is, this Callidus is expensive compared to other infiltrators like the Vindicare, or even things like the Eversaw, which can kind of replicate that with a 9-inch scout move. So you have to make sure this thing lives until you get Reign of Confusion off. After that, the Callidus can die if they need to. So, but one of the nice things is if you do start on the board, you've got a decent chance if you pull, Cleanse as your tactical secondary or secure No Man's Land turn 1 and you go first, to score your maximum 5 points. Because for these, you need to have control over 2 primary objectives in No Man's Land, which is not necessarily easy to do unless you're running something like Double Blade Champion on the board, or you've got some infiltrating or scouting units. It's just not reliable. You might roll really good on your advances, and you might be able to do it, but typically it's not so reliable. Plus, you might not even necessarily want to commit, your actual chunky units like your Guardians or your Wardens to hit these primaries, because it might just put you in like an awful shooting lane, for example. The other thing to keep in mind is, don't forget that you can, every single turn, at the end of your opponent's turn, you can put your Callidus back into reserve, and they'll be able to deep strike immediately the next turn, and I think they have to, actually. So the rule of thumb is, unless that model is the only kind of model on that objective, and that's the only reason that you would score it at the start of your next command phase, or at the end of your next command phase, you should be thinking, this probably would do better to go back into deep strike. So just try not to forget that. So let's now have a look at the matchups. Before I proceed further, big shout out to Battle Goose from the Can Hammer Discord. He's one of these players who've got like a really, really big range of experience playing 40k, including other armies. Obviously, I think he does play primarily Custodes, but he plays a lot of people, he plays a lot of games. I think his local meta is pretty strong, and yeah, he's just got that kind of wide ranging of experience. So, you know, big shout out to him. I asked him to kind of to check my homework on some of these matchups, and he we broadly agreed on most things, which I was thankful for. But he did definitely give me some additional insight into some of the other specific matchups where I'm like, you know, I've never run into these matchups. I don't know them in 10th. I'm not familiar with the codex. I don't even know what's a meta list that I'd expect them to run. So he gave me a few, you know, when we had differences of opinion, I just deferred to his opinion for some of these. So let's move on to Admech. So this is again one of these matchups. I don't have experience with them in 10th. I don't think we'll see them very often. But if we do, I think what we really want to use is Reign of Confusion on Lethal Dosage. This is a 2 CP stratagem to give them, that gives them +1 to wound and shooting versus everything excluding vehicles. Obviously, we're not going to be a very vehicle heavy army unless you're doing something kind of weird. You know, I think I would expect you would have maybe maximum 2 vehicles with 2 Callidus. If you want to run Dreadnoughts or something, like, in my mind, you're just not playing competitive anymore. You're playing, I don't know, hardcore casual or something. So I think Lethal Dosage is probably where we want the Vec to land on. Baleful Halo gives them a -1 to wound in melee versus non-vehicles, so something like their Cataphrons, for example, or their Drukhari. We don't really care about that. If we're in melee with them, they're all going to die. It's basically irrelevant. Vengeful Fallout is a 1 CP return fire in the shooting phase, so you shoot something, they get to shoot you back if you're an eligible target. This is something I think they're probably going to use a lot, but you don't necessarily have to trigger it because your shooting probably isn't that great into a lot of them, and you know, if you know that's available into one of their very shooty units, you don't necessarily have to allow them to trigger it. In terms of their mitigation, something to keep in mind is many of their units have an ability where they get a CP refund on a 5-up on a stratagem that they use on that unit. The Skitarii Marshal doesn't get a free stratagem, but it can repeat a stratagem. So against Admech, I don't personally think like the Callidus Assassin is increasing your win rate into the matchup, but I don't think we care because we should beat Admech pretty easily anyway, just on the relative strength of the codex. So let's look into Votann. Again, a pretty favourable matchup for us. Their army is just too expensive, I think, in 10th. Here, I think the clear standout stratagem that we want to target is Void Armor, which works just like Armor of Contempt. It's a 1 CP stratagem to reduce AP by 1. So this is kind of the best example of a stratagem that we want to target Reign of Confusion on, because it's a 1 CP stratagem. It could be used up to 3 times in a battle round, and obviously if they want to use it every single time, it's now going to cost them 3 extra CP a battle round. The other things that they might want to use it on, although you can consider it, but I still think you just always just save it for Void Armor, is Ordered Retreat, which is a 1 CP fallback shoot and charge, or Ancestral Sentence for a 1 CP sustained 1 or sustained 2 versus a judgment target. So in terms of their mitigation, the Hernkin Pioneers get a CP refund on a 5-up, it's whatever. And I think in this matchup, the Callidus Assassin is doing work. It's probably pushing your win rate probably 5-10% in my opinion. But obviously we should be favored into this matchup anyway. Sisters of Battle. So this is like, for example, one of the ones that Battlegoose helped me out on, because he was like, they're actually built mainly shooty now. So which is something I wouldn't have known because I just haven't run into the matchup, haven't really looked into their codex. They just seem pretty sad with the nerfs to melter guns in general. So we probably want to use Reign of Confusion here on Rejoice the Fallen, which is a 1 CP return fire strat. It's just like the Admech one. You shoot them, they get to shoot you if you're an eligible target for them. Because apparently they're built more as a shooty list now. If they happen to not be built shooty and they have like some melee, you can think about the 2 CP fight on death or the 1 CP plus to wound and melee. Now, because we fight first, you have to think, okay, even if they do charge us, we fight first. If we kill everything, there's nothing to smack us anyway. So we don't have to worry too much about the +1 to wound and melee. The thing that we want to think about is the CP fight on death, because if we stop that, that's really good. But obviously, how many times are they going to be able to do that? Because nothing happens the first time that they activate fight on death. So if we want to actually get value out of putting Reign of Confusion on Spirit of the Martyr, they'd have to trigger it twice. So now that's obviously 4 CP for them, 5 with Vect, right? So now you only get the value of it only once, right? So how many units are likely to be something that they could use fight on death on, right? So the value of that kind of reduces unless they've got, unless they've gone full melee. If they've gone full melee, then yeah, obviously I think you pick Spirit of the Martyr. In terms of their mitigation, their Cannoness gives them a CP refund on a 4-up, and Junith Arisa just gives them an extra CP per command phase for them. So they'll have plenty of CP. It's just about how their army is constructed. So I think typically, if they're built kind of shooty, just stick with the standard Rejoice the Fallen. But if they are somehow melee heavy, think about the 2 CP fight and death stratagem. For Deathguard, in terms of the global kind of win rate and how the Callidus helps to that, I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's probably neutral in terms of what else you could be using the 115 points for. Obviously, there's the additional benefit that the Callidus Assassin is helping you massively in achieving secondary objectives and scoring points for you after you get off the Reign of Confusion. Deathguard, another one of these armies that I haven't fought in 10th yet or looked into too much. I think we probably want to use Reign of Confusion on Disgusting the Resilient, which gives them a 2 CP stratagem for -1 damage in the fight phase. Obviously, the vast majority of our damage is done in the fight phase. The vast majority of our weapons, basically everything other than Trajan's Axe is damage too. So taking a 50% hit to our damage output is bad. Obviously, it's not as nice because it's a 2 CP strat, so they're not going to use it as much as a 1 CP strat. But obviously, you have to think, they're always going to have Tallyman, I think. And Tallyman's getting, I would say, 3 to 4 CP over the course of the game. The other thing you could think about is if you happen to be kind of built as a shooty army, which I suppose you could do. I don't think it's very common, but you could do that. Then you might think about using Reign of Confusion on Cloud of Flies to increase the CP cost of stealth for them, which is -1 to hit versus shooting. If they happen to be like a very shooty army, they could use Boil Blight, which is a 1 CP +1 to hit basically, and ignore cover and Rage of a Contagion objective. I think Sanguinous Flux is giving them sustained 1 or sustained 2 in melee in range of a infected objective that they control. Again, the way that I think about it is because we're expecting to be fighting first, we don't care about how they increase their melee output. We care more about just making sure they don't get to swing back. So I think even here, we don't care about reducing their output. We care about stopping them from reducing our output, because if we kill everything anyway, there's nothing to swing back. So I think that's the way to think about it. If there happen to be some sort of weird shooty list, maybe it's not weird, I don't know, maybe Deathguard just goes shooty now with the PBCs or something. Ferric Blight gives them a +1 AP in shooting, and if in range of a contagion, they get +2 AP for critical wounds. So don't know if they'd really spam that much, but this is one of these matchups that we kind of expect to win anyway. I don't think the Callidus is doing that much for us in terms of the global matchup. Could we have spent the 115 points or something else? Yes. Is it probably better? Like, probably. You could almost get 2 Alaris for it. I think it's pretty neutral. In terms of Drukhari, another matchup I haven't played in 10th yet, but didn't really know the answer to this, so I thought, okay, I'll ask somebody who's really good at Drukhari. Turns out Skari's pretty good at Drukhari. Shout out to Skari. So I just hit him up, and I was like, okay, if you were a Custodes and you had a Callidus, what would you hate for Reign of Confusion to land on? He was like, real easy, Strike and Fade. So I was like, okay, cool, thanks. So Strike and Fade is a 2 CP stratagem to allow you to do a normal move after your shooting phase. So, it's kind of just like the Tau Fire and Fade or the Eldar Fire and Fade. You pop out, you shoot, you pop back out of cover. You can't be shot, really interacted with, unless you have indirect towering, which we don't. So the other thing that you could use it on is Quicksilver Reactions, which is a 1 CP -1 to be hit. So, I thought it was kind of close between those two, but Skari says Strike and Fade, so we go with Strike and Fade. Who am I to argue with that? Their mitigation, they've got Labyrinth Cunning on one of their characters to give them CP refunds. I don't think it's that big of a deal, to be honest. I think if you are facing Drukhari in competitive, they're probably doing the Dark Lance spam, which is why they're probably leading on Strike and Fade. Again, I don't know in terms of the matchup how it would be. I think it just depends on, you know, how fast your army is, how many things you've got in deep strike, how well you use rapid ingress. Because obviously, if you're just walking up the board very slowly, you probably can get shot to death by a lot of dog lancers. In terms of whether this is helping you in the matchup, I think it's probably neutral to negative against Drukhari, because strike and fade isn't going to impact it that much. You know, they weren't going to be using it 2-3 times a turn. So yeah, Grey Knights. This is actually a really good one, a really good matchup where the Callidus Assassin is really good. So here we could use it on True Silver Armor, which is a 1 CP reduce AP, so it's just like Armor of Contempt, it's just like Void Armor. They could use it 3 times in a battle round. The thing with this is there is another annoying stratagem which Grey Knights would use a lot, which is Mist of Deimos, which is a 1 CP. If you move within 9, they can move 6 inches, or they can go into Strategic Reserve if the unit has Deep Strike, and pretty much everything in their army has Deep Strike. So why is this kind of good for them is you don't necessarily get to charge the things that you want to charge, right? And if you don't get to charge it, sometimes you don't get to reach an objective, and they've, you know, they might have stickied it or something like that. So this is very annoying for you. So their army has Grandmasters, so they get a free stratagem, they can repeat the stratagem, or their Grandmaster and Nemesis armor, I think, can get a 1 CP strat even if it costs more than that. So this is, they can kind of mitigate your CP tax with Reign of Confusion here. But I think, although True Silver Armor does seem like a really good value, I think specifically against Grey Knights, I think Mist of Deimos is going to help you more by locking down their mobility much more, because even if you can kill everything you touch, if you can't get to them, you can just get outscored by them. So that's pretty annoying. So into Grey Knights, I think Callidus is helping your win rate like 5-10% here. Tau, I think the standard stratagem that you would pick is Coordinate to Engage, which is 1 CP, and the Observer unit gets a +1 to their ballistic skill and ignore cover if Marker Light unit. So obviously they're going to use it on their Marker Light units. This is 1 CP, they're going to be using it probably every single shooting phase that they have. If they happen to be battlesuit heavy, if they kind of have more than one large unit of battlesuits, you can think about using it on Strike and Fade, which is 2 CP. This is again just a move after shoot. The other thing that you could possibly think about using it on is Overwatch. So I think it probably depends on kind of what their army looks like, on which one you want to pick, but I think your default one would be Coordinate to Engage. In terms of their mitigation, Shadow Sun is giving you CP regen on a 5-up within a unit that uses a stratagem within 6 inches, and their Ethereals are giving them CP regen on a 4-up. So, you know, they're going to have a lot of CP in my opinion, most of the that you see. In terms of the matchup, I think it's fairly neutral. Obviously, they will be using Coordinate to Engage or Strike and Fade a lot during the games, but I don't think these are. I think they're like kind of game breaking stratagems, so it's definitely helpful. So I think it's pretty neutral. World Eaters, this is a bit of a weird one. So I'm going to talk through kind of a few of the good strats. I think this is one of these matchups where the Callidus is not doing that much for you, because the way that the stratagems are kind of exist in their army, there isn't one that they're going to spam one every single turn necessarily. Or one that's going to give you that much value. I think this kind of reminds me of Orks, where they've got a lot of, or even GSC really, where they've got a lot of stratagems. They want to use them, you know, a few here and there. They're going to be very situationally useful, but it just doesn't give you that value, right? So Skull Throne is a 1 CP plus to wound versus character vehicle monster. Obviously, most of our things are going to have the character keyword, because we're just going to have a leader in the unit. +1 to wound is obviously really good, but again, if we fight first, we don't care about it that much. But you know, a good player is not going to let you just kill stuff for free. They're going to swarm you with units. So they're going to basically overload an objective where you fight first, you kill something, or you kill most of something, and then they're going to smack you back with 2-3 things. And obviously they'll activate it when they want to go, so +1 to wound is still pretty good. Blood God is a 1 CP Blessing of Corn roll, and you can combo this with other enhancements to kind of fish for the things that you want. Depending on, you know, how they've rolled originally, this might be good. I think they have to kill something and then they can start doing the roll. This is something that you might want to use. you know, if they want to get Angron back, for example, and they want to fish for these 666s, this is something that they might be using quite a lot. Blood Offering, I think, is pretty situational. Is a 1 CP. If you shoot them off an objective, they can still control it when you shoot them off. So if you've got good shooting, you can consider using this against them for that. Apoplectic Fury is a 1 CP auto advance 6. So obviously this is good with an army that gets a lot of access to advance and charge, which World Eaters do. And Khorne Cares Not is a 2 CP -1 damage in melee. Obviously this is just going to be useful against us a lot, because again, most of our melee is damage 2. But because they have so many kind of stratagems that they might want to use, this isn't like an army where we're getting amazing value with the Callidus Assassin. The main value with the Callidus Assassin here, I think, is, it's going to sound weird, this might be one of the matchups where you actually want to consider sacrificing your Callidus without getting off your Reign of Confusion. And the reason for that is they have some scout units, and these scout units could allow them to make turn 1 charges, and or it could allow them to kind of movement block you into like towards your own deployment zone, so you can't really get to where you want to go. And if you were to sacrifice an assassin that has infiltrate, this would be the Vindicate or the Callidus, you could kind of stop all that, because you know you put the unit within 9, but then they can't make scout moves within 9. So you might be able to stop them from doing that, and I think this is a worthwhile trade in the matchup. So even here, where you don't have very good Reign of Confusion value, just being able to block the scout moves probably would be useful. They might not have the scout moves, but I would expect World Eaters to have a list that allows them to make scout moves, because obviously being able to threaten turn 1 charges is very big, and obviously Angron can do it anyway. Chaos Demons. This is again one of these armies where I don't think there's a stratagem that they use a lot. They just have a lot of good stratagems they want to use, you know, 1-2 situationally times in the game. So Draught of Terror is 1 CP additional AP and reroll wounds versus Battle Shocked. I mean, yes, it's good. What I tend to find in Chaos Demons is they've got, like, you know, 3, 4, 5 really big units that do all the damage. They don't need additional AP. They're all, like, all their swings are like AP 2+. So they don't really care about that. You know, this could be situationally useful against some of their smaller units that they're using kind of for objective control. You know, if they want to do some screening, if they're trying to move, block you turn 1, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't really worry about it. Warp Surge is 1 CP advance and charge in Shadow of Chaos. Shadow of Chaos, they're going to have it in their deployment zone. They're going to have it in No Man's Land if they control at least half of the objectives. Now, obviously this would be good, but I think they're going to use it once or twice, and then after that, everything's just always going to be in combat every single turn anyway, without needing to advance and charge. Like, you're just going to have a massive fight, turn 2, 3, maybe 4, and then everything's going to be over. And at this time, they're just not going to need it that much anymore. So you'd only get like 1 or 2 CP value max out of it, in my opinion. Denizens of the Warp is a 1 CP 3-inch deep strike, but no charging. So again, this is something I think they're going to use 2, maybe 3 times absolutely maximum, which means you'd only get 2 CP worth of value out of it. How they can use this is they can steal objectives from you, so get used to deploying your units in like a little 5-point star or pentagon shape, or a square, so that they can't steal onto the objective. But the other really cool thing that they can do is they can deep strike within 3 to put a screening line in, so that it makes your charges very, very difficult. So just keep that in mind. Demonic Invulnerability is a 1 CP reroll 1s to their invul saves versus shooting. This is very strong, obviously, but obviously if you don't have a lot of shooting, it's not that relevant. And Realm of Chaos is a 1 CP. They can pick 2 units from the Shadow of Chaos and put it into Strategic Reserve at the end of your turn, or they can just pick 1 unit that's not within Shadow of Chaos. And this is better than it sounds, because they can deep strike back within 6 instead of within 9 if it's in the Shadow of Chaos. So 6-inch charges are pretty reliable. They're significantly more reliable than 9-inch charges, so something to think about. In terms of their mitigation, Kairos Fate Weaver is giving them a CP refund if they roll a d6 over the battle round within 6 inches of the model. So they'll have a decent amount of CP. They're not going to be drowning in CP like some other armies. So I think they've got some good stratagems. I don't think we're getting that much value out of it. Again, here, this is one of the armies where you can think about sacking your Callidus Assassin just for its infiltrate value to stop you being move blocked turn 1 by their scout move. So I think it's the Fiends of Slanesh or something like that. They move, I think they move like 14 inches or something scout move, and then they're advancing turn 1, and basically depending on the ruins, etc., they can just go in a straight line. They can just fully block you in your own deployment zone if they roll well. So, which can be very annoying because they're obviously, you want to be set up on the objectives to do, to the extent that you can to fight first, score points and primary, that kind of thing. So if you're like a full turn behind, this can be very bad. So this is one of these reasons why I advocate always having at least one infiltrate unit in your army. Obviously in an army there's so many things that you want to cover, so this isn't always possible, but my personal view is you want to always have at least one infiltrate unit. And this is one of the matchups where we don't mind sacking the Reign of Confusion value versus stopping them from doing the move block. So how does this help in the global win rate? I think this is hard to assess because you might have a Vindicare instead, which would be able to achieve the same job significantly cheaper at 80 points. So I think it's kind of still fine into the matchup. Chaos Knights. Now, this is a bit of a strange one, right? So they've got Diabolic Bulwark, which is a 1 CP. They get a 4-up involved versus shooting, so it's just the same as Rotate Iron Shields, but for Chaos Knights. This is good, but obviously we don't have as many guns as usual factions do, so it's kind of less relevant for us, right? If you have 2 or 3 Callidus, yeah, you can think about this. It's probably pretty good, but probably you don't have 2 or 3 Callidus. Or maybe you do, I don't know. You might be running no guns, you might be running just 1 Callidus, you might be running just 1 Land Raider or something like that, right? So here, Chaos Knights, I think you want to be a bit situational. Some of them are built very kind of melee focused. They might have 1 or 2 rampages, they might have 6 of the carnivores, and they move pretty fast, they slap pretty hard, and the way that they're kind of quote unquote fast is not by increasing their move speed really, but because they can run through walls. So they've got a 1 CP strat for 2 War Dogs or 1 Titanic model to basically move through walls or models as if they weren't there. And obviously this gets them threat ranges that you weren't counting on. So I think this is very good if you see 6 carnivores and 2 rampages, just automatically pick this and don't think about anything else. They have some other good war dogs as well, which do shooting and stuff. So here you could think about using it on Dreadhounds, which is a 1 CP sustained hits for 2 war dogs versus 1 target unit, and gives them crits on 5s for battle shocks. So obviously Chaos Knights are also tend to be triggering lots of battle shocks to the extent that they can. You're often taking penalties to your battle shock test, so it's kind of works nicely. Or Long Leash, which is a 1 CP, 3 war dogs, count as always being within aura range for an opponent model. So you kind of have to look at their list and think, okay, what are they likely to use more often, rather than just think, okay, we're always going to pick this in that way. Tank shock against all knight factions are always something to consider, very relevant, but it's significantly less relevant for Custodes because we get the 4-up shrug on the Feel No Pains versus it. So here I think the Callidus Assassin is still doing really good work for us, and they tend not to have so many drops, although they do have lots of war dogs actually, so maybe that's not even that true. So but even so, they don't really want to be like everywhere, so they're probably not fully screening, so your Callidus is still getting to do quite a lot of stuff. If you want to get scramblers or behind enemy lines or something, drop into that backfield, I think should be pretty easy. So I think into the Chaos Knights matchup, your Callidus is definitely pulling weight. In the Orks matchup, this is again one of these ones where they've got quite a few good stratagems that you would like to increase the CP cost on, but I don't think there's one that they're using all the time regularly. So the one that really comes to mind is Orcs Has Never Beaten, which is a 2 CP fight on death in melee. Obviously this is one of the ways that it counters our fight first. It's not on a 4-up or anything like that, they just all get a fight, so this is good. Unbridled Carnage, 1 CP, they get critical hits on a 5-up for a unit. Obviously they get the exploding 6s, so this is just a way for them to increase output. Ardus Nils is a 1 CP -1 to wound versus target orc, so versus stuff like Terminators, which is rerolling against everything that has a character or a vehicle, or Guardians on an objective that they control. if you are now wounding on 4s instead of 3s. 4-up reroll is 75%, 3-up reroll is 83%, so it's not that much of a reduction. Whereas if it's on something like Wardens, you're looking at wounding on 4s instead of on 3s. So that's 66 versus 50. Here we go, is a 1 CP plus 2 to advance and charge rolls. Obviously it's going to be more relevant on the turn that they war. So again, you can see like they could use lots of stratagems. I don't think there's one that you necessarily want to use. You're going to get that much value from. I think Orks has never beaten is probably like the clear leader, but obviously because it's a 2 CP strat instead of a 1 CP strat, they might just not have enough CP to use it anyway. So there is that. In terms of their mitigation, their Gretchen gets CP regen on objectives on a 4-up. So yeah, I think the Callidus is kind of probably not actually helping that much into the matchup, just because we don't get that value from Reign of Confusion. Thousand Suns, I really think the one that we want to be saving Reign of Confusion for is Destined by Fate, which is their 1 CP ignore a failed save on a Psycho model. So this is basically going to be Magnus. I think every single Thousand Suns this is always going to have Magnus. So, and in addition to the fact that they've got Echoes from the Warp, which is like it's a Cabal ritual, I think, which allows them to repeat a stratagem for free. So this is very big because it just allows you to take 0 damage on a failed save twice. So we want to add the CP cost to that. I think that's good. The other thing that you might want to use it on is 1 CP Psycho unit can reroll hits and wounds, and they can make non-Psycho weapons into Psycho weapons, I think. So this is something to consider, but you have to think, you know, do I want to try and kill Magnus this game, or am I going to try and ignore Magnus this game? And I think Magnus is pretty hard to ignore. So for me, I'm just... I think I'm just always using Destined by Fate for the Vex. In terms of their army kind of works by kind of skewing... It destroys the normal rules of the game in terms of value, because Twist of Fate just turns off all armor saves, but it's not so punishing versus Custodes because everything has a 4-up invul, everything has that kind of base, you know, they can't get through that. So you don't have to worry about all the other kind of combos that other armies might want to consider for Vex, for Reign of Confusion. So here is just winning against the matchup. I think it's probably slightly good into the matchup versus having 115 points or something else. Space Marines here, I'm just going to assume it's the Gladius detachment. There are all these other detachments, even into all those apart from Deathwatch. I think if you just always pick Armor of Contempt, it's absolutely fine, and it's probably optimal. So, you know, again, this is the -1 AP, and you know, they can use it in your shooting phase, your fight phase, their fight phase. So in terms of the mitigation, they've got a lot. You know, they've got captains that give them a free stratagem, they can repeat it. They've also got Gilliman, which will give them a free strat, and they can repeat it within 12. Infiltrators can get a CP refund on a 5-up, although I don't think they'll probably be using that many stratagems that we care about too much. And same with Impulsors, can get a CP refund on a 5-up within a unit that uses it within 6. I'm not sure how many Impulsors we're going to see though. So, but either way, they're going to get a fair amount of free stratagems, and they'll be using Armor of Contempt a fair amount. I think the Callidus into Space Marines is, you know, it's definitely giving you a 5-10% swing in your win rate, just because they're going to be using this so much against you otherwise. Specifically against Deathwatch, you can pick Hellfire rounds instead of Armor of Contempt. Hellfire rounds is giving them anti-infantry 2+ on their weapons that are non-dev, or I think anti-monster 5-up. We don't have any monsters as far as I know. So Deathwatch is the only exception, where instead of automatically picking Armor of Contempt, you can think about picking Hellfire. But even against Deathwatch, you can pick Armor of Contempt. It kind of depends on, you know, how shooty their list is and the AP values, etc. You know, are you scared about it that much or not? Space Marines, oh sorry, Chaos Space Marines. So here they've got like a weird Armor of Contempt. So this is 2 CP, reduce AP by 1 for Infernal Rites. I guess this is a cost of not being loyal to the Emperor. It's good. I don't think they're going to use it nearly as much because 2 CP is quite a lot. The one I would probably go to is for Profane Zeal, which is a 1 CP reroll 1s to hit and wound, or if they're Chaos and Divided and they can pick, you know, the Chaos Mogs and their units, they can reroll all hits and wounds. So 1 CP reroll all hits and wounds is obviously mega, so I think they're going to be using this every turn. So I think you just slap it on that and call it a day. They've also got Eternal Hate, so 1 CP Fight on Death on a 4-up, and you get +1 to the roll if you're Khorne. I mean, it's good versus Fight First, but the fact that you have to roll a 4-up kind of sucks. So I still think Profane Zeal is the way to go in here. And again, a natural swiftness, they get 1 CP advanced shoot and charge. And if you're Slaanesh, no, you get advanced shoot and charge. And if you're Slaanesh, sorry, you get fallback shoot and charge. And if you're Slaanesh, you get advanced shoot and charge. And obviously Abaddon, you're always going to have an Abaddon squad, I think, in competitive Chaos Space Marines. The thing is, they're probably not going to use it that much in the game. 2 to maybe 3 times maximum. Whereas Profane Zeal, they might use 4 or 5 times in the game. So I think you're just going to get more value out of that. If they have some weird Nurgle shooting lists with Forge Fiends, you know, you can start thinking about using it on Dark Obscuration, which gives you stealth. Obviously, stealth isn't that super for 1 CP, but if they happen to be Nurgle, they can always get lone agents. You might just end up getting shot by a lot of stuff that you can't really shoot, which is pretty annoying. So you can think about that, but probably you just save it from Profane Zeal. In terms of their mitigation, their Chaos Law gets a free stratagem that they can repeat. And you have to think about this with, you know, they could have a Nurgle Forge Fiend for Dark Obscuration, and then they've also RI a Chaos Terminator unit, which is either Abaddon or, you know, they can make it Nurgle, and then you can't shoot it within 12 as well. So this can be very annoying, so keep that in mind. Abaddon gets a CP on a 2-up after a Dark Pact success. The Dark Pact success can be pretty reliable because he can give himself or give his unit rerollable leadership tests. So I think this is pretty high value because they're just going to be using Profane Zeal very often. So this is just helping into your matchup with Chaos Space Marines. Into Custodes, the Mirror. I think the Callidus here is very big, very big. I think this is like a 10-15% swing in win rate on who has the Callidus Assassin. To me, there's only 2 candidates for what you would want to Reign of Confusion, right? You could do Unwavering Sentinels, which is your fight first, or you can do Arcane Genetic Alchemy for the -1 damage. And obviously, everyone's doing basically 2 damage to each other in the shooting with the spears or with the melee. And obviously, you know, you're not saving it for the shooting, you're saving it for when you're getting hit by like 30-40 hits at -2 damage to, right? Now, fighting first is nice, but it's I think AGA is just worth way more in the matchup, because this is just straight 50% damage reduction. You can mitigate a lot of the stuff with fight first with -1 to hit, AGA yourself, and even feel no pain on your wardens if you have them. You can shrug quite a lot of that. But if you were just getting hit for the full 2 damage, even after that, it's stronger, and I think you can use it in more phases than you could use fight first. So feel free to agree with me. I think you just always use it on AGA in the Mirror. Obviously, you know, their mitigation, you know, we've got captains, you get a free stratagem that you can repeat. I think this is enormous value in the Mirror. Astra Militarum. I think you could build Astra Militarum in a few ways. I think the best way is probably just still lean into indirect even after the points nerfs. I think the reason why you don't see it that much is it's very, very binary in its matchups. There are some matchups where they just win, whether they go first or second. They have other matchups where if they go first, they just win. And they have a bunch of other matchups where if they go second, they probably still win. And then they have like a few other matchups where they just auto lose. They cannot win. So as a result, I don't think you see full artillery, full indirect in comp that much. But if you do, it's going to feel pretty bad. So here, I don't care kind of, you know, which archetype that they lean into. I think every competitive Astra Militarum list is going to have a decent amount of indirect in it anyway. So stuff like Manticores, they're going to have the Basilisks, right? The stuff that reduces your movement, so it's going to take you even longer to get there. So here they've got a 1 CP strat for Expert Bombardiers, 1 CP indirect versus the targeted unit, they get +1 to hit. If they've happen to have something like lots of Sentinels, they can get a 2 CP regiment or squadron. What is it? Yeah, but 2 CP dead regiment can come back into strategic reserve, so they can just, it's infinite Sentinels with the Hunter Killers just coming back and shooting you. But that's probably less scary than the indirect, making you really slow. And also Fields of Fire for 2 CP regiment or squadron will target an enemy unit, and then other regiment or squadron gets an additional AP against it. This can be a lot of value versus focus firing new units, but obviously it's 2 CP instead of 1 CP. And I think Expert Bombardiers, they're going to be using it every single turn of the game that they're alive. In terms of the mitigation, they're going to have, in my mind, quite a lot of command points. Lord Solo's giving them 5 extra CP over the course of the game, assuming that it lives. I think it's quite hard to bodyguard because it can only go in certain units, and you can just, well, assuming you can get to it, you can just you can kill the bodyguard unit relatively easily. Creed is giving them free stratagem within 12 that can be repeated, and Foxcaster units can get a refund on a 5-up with a +1 to the roll if they've got an officer within 6. So I think this is a case where the Callidus is helping you out here, because you are going to reduce the amount of like real CP that they have to use. But additionally, if you are facing a full indirect Astra Militarum army, you're probably going to be having a rough time anyway. If they go first, you probably just can't get to them. They kill too much stuff, you're too slow, and a good list, like if they're like stupid indirect, like yeah, you might be able to get up there and beat them, but like a good list, they will flood the board with Ratlings infiltrating, they will flood the board with Scout moving Sentinels, and you will struggle to get out of your deployment zone very far, and you'll be slowed, and your advances will be slowed. It's going to be ugly. You won't be able to deep strike. They'll screen everything out. It can be pretty ugly, but you don't have to worry about the matchup too much, because I don't think it's going to be that competent comp. Tyranids. I think the only thing that we really care about here is rapid regeneration. It's a 1 CP 6-up Feel No Pain, which doesn't feel like that amazing, but it's a 5-up Feel No Pain. Let's put this up here. It's a 5-up Feel No Pain in Synapse. They're going to be in Synapse unless they're like Omega Stupid or something, right? The other things that they might use it on is Adrenal Surge, which is a 2 CP 5-up crits in Synapse for up to 2 units. I just don't think this is as good or as like a 5-up Feel No Pain in Synapse. They're going to be using every single time that they can, which is a lot. Or Death Frenzy, which is it's just 1 CP fight on death for 4-up. Having it on a 4-up is a bit sad. If they wanted to use it on something like Old One Eye or a Haruspex or a Carnifex or something like that, if they just don't, it's just not consistent enough. Or Synaptic Insight, 1 CP, 1 unit, or 2 in Synapse can pick another adaptation. I just don't think this is something that's going to be used as often as a 5-up Feel No Pain. 5-up Feel No Pain, really big. In terms of mitigation, the Tyrant gets a free stratagem within 12 that can be repeated, and the Swarm Lord gets an extra CP per parent Tyranid's command phase. I don't think most lists are going to be running both. Technically they could, but I think that's probably too much just in kind of buffing and HQ characters, etc. But this is good value into Tyranids. Just hurting the amount of times that they can get a 5-up Feel No Pain. 5-up Feel No Pains are really big because it can be very swingy. Like something that you thought should die, if they just spike really high in the rolls, it just doesn't die and gets to slap you back. So really relevant. Necrons. This is Omega good versus Necrons, because what are they going to use all the time, right? They're going to use Protocol of Undying Legions, which is 1 CP reanimate after shooting or melee. This triggers reanimation, so they could get all the buffs with the Ghost Dogs and all this kind of other stuff. This is what makes them kind of unkillable, because you do a few damage to them, they reanimate more than before you start shooting at them or hitting them, etc. So this is really, really good. If, for example, they're not running like the typical list, with the unkillable warrior bricks or the almost unkillable Lichguard bricks, right? If they're doing something funny like triple Hexmark for the Overwatches, the free Overwatches and Overwatches hitting on 2s, you can think about putting Raid of Confusion on Overwatch to make it cost 1 CP. So they can't just Overwatch 3 times a turn for free. Protocol of the Hungry Void, 1 CP is giving you +1 to strength and melee, and +1 AP if they're character led. They're always going to be character led. You can think about this maybe if they go like full melee, but even then I think Protocol of Undying Legions is just always your standard one here. Resurrect on death on infantry character, like yes, they're going to do it the first time you do it, but again, nothing is as good as this. Oops. This is just too good. Protocol of Undying Legions. So the Overlord can get a free stratagem for its unit and repeat it. Necrons, yeah, so they'll be doing this in like your shooting phase, they'll be doing it in your melee phase. It's just too good. Imperial Knights. This is a bit of a weird one. Other factions that are not Custodes, this would be probably really good, right? Because you'll just put it on Rotate Iron Shields, which is a 4-up invul save versus shooting, and you just call it a day. But Custodes probably don't have that much shooting, or it's not good enough for it to count, or even if you have some guns, they'll probably all be dead by turn 3, so you won't get the value out of it anymore, if that makes sense. Same thing with Tank Shock. Other armies would want to consider putting it on Tank Shock instead of Rotate Iron Shields, perhaps, because having an auto 6, well, it's not auto, but it's practically auto 6 mortals when they make a charge, is going to hurt a lot, but obviously we've got the 4-up Shrug versus mortals, so it's less relevant. So here we're probably looking into either Trophy Claim, where they get a 1 CP +1 to wound versus monster vehicle, and they get a refund of it if it dies. So you're probably going to have to like maybe up to 2 Callidus, or maybe like a Callidus and a Land Raider, something like that. Or Squire's Duty, which is 1 CP 2 armigers, get an additional AP versus the target. That's already really good on something like Lightning Locks, something like Helverins, for example. And additional damage if honoured. Right. So here I think you just have to look at their list and think, what do you want to use it on? I think you just have to be flexible. It's not as good into Knights when you're Custodes as if you're a Space Marine or something. You just pick Rotate Iron Shields and call it a day. So to the mitigation, Canis Rex just gets a free strat per turn. It is what it is. You can't do that much into it. Again, into Imperial Knights is kind of like Chaos Knights, although they tend to have more big ones than Chaos Knights do, who go more War Dog heavy. They're going to find it hard to screen their backfield. Your Callidus is going to be doing secondaries a lot, and obviously Lone Agent, Deep Strike every single turn basically. So I think it's not too bad. It's probably EV neutral in the Imperial Knights matchup, because you're not getting that much value from Raid of Confusion, but you are getting value from being up to Deep Strike every single turn, being Lone Agent. Into Aeldari, they've got a bunch of annoying strats. Fire and Fade super annoying with their Fire Prisms, so that's 2 CP move after shooting. Phantasm though, 2 CP normal move up to 7 in your movement phase after you move. Now, why this is stronger is them being able to move after seeing how you move, and in particular being able to move away from your charges, or you're trying to set up charge and they move 7 away from you. This is way more annoying than Fire and Fade, so this is why you just stick it on Phantasm. If they've got other stuff like Quicksilver reactions -1 to be hit, or Overwatch could be relevant, but I think Phantasm is just where you put it against Aeldari. In terms of the mitigation, they've got the Autarch for a CP per turn if it's on the battlefield, and there's the Warlord. Assamin gets to Overwatch for 0 CP and repeat a stratagem. It's like, yeah, it's whatever. In terms of, is the Callidus helping you into the Aeldari matchup? Probably. Don't think it matters that much, because I think the matchup is so skewed still at the moment, as of 15th of July 2023, that yeah, it's probably helping you marginally. So it's not making it a winning matchup in my opinion. GSC have loads of really good strats. I don't think it's helping you though enough. Nothing can help you enough with the GSE. GSE just basically need enough. Like well piloted GSE and a good list is just way too strong. So I asked a really good GSE player what would they hate it on the most, and they were of the view that we've got lots of good strats. You could just spend the CP somewhere else, but probably perfect ambush, which is 1 CP. They get +1 ballistic skill and +1 AP coming out of deep strike. They're going to be deep striking you turn 2, turn 3, 4, 5, right? They're not going to run out of units. Let's be real. So they're definitely going to use this at least 4 times. So this is where you get the value from. Tunnel crawlers, they get a 1 CP 3-inch deep strike, but they don't get to charge. Doesn't matter. They just hit you with like demo charges or like a bajillion seismic guns. They set up screens, whatever. Coordinated trap is 2 CP +1 to wound for 2 GSE units versus a target. This is obviously strong, but again, if you put Rain of Confusion on this, they can just spend the CP somewhere else, basically, if they want to. Or Return to Shadows, which is 1 CP, 2 battle line units, or 1 infantry unit can go back into strategic reserve at the end of your turn, and then they get to just deep strike in. So you can see they've got lots of good strats that they want to be using, but I think Perfect Ambush is the way that you ensure that this is something they could be using every single time that they deep strike. They will be deep striking you every single time, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5. So additionally, they get some good mitigation. So Inscrutable Cunning is giving them a CP refund on a 4-up, and the Nexos is giving them a free stratagem that can be repeated. So they're going to have lots of CP, they're going to be using lots of CP. Being able to Rain of Confusion on Perfect Ambush is good. It's not moving the needle in my mind on a GSE matchup. The GSE matchup is just horrific, right? If they're going first, I don't think you have a chance. I don't care what your list is. The main way that you can beat GSE, not that I've done it versus a good player, is you go first. I think you start basically everything on the board, and you just get good advance rolls, and you try and shove them back into their deployment zone as far as you can, and try and keep them locked up there and just win on points. Like, you'll probably be tabled or near table by the end of the game. I think you have maybe like a 15% win rate going second. No, overall maybe something like that. I don't think it's a good matchup. It's not like the Callidus is gonna save the match, in my opinion. So anyway, I think I haven't missed any factions other than like specific Space Marine ones. They just take Armor of Contempt. If you're Deathwatch, you think about taking the Hellfire rounds. And that's it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you did make it to the end of the video, it means you're probably one of the hardcore geeks that likes 40k and Custodes quite a lot. Please make sure to turn on notifications for the channel. I think only like 6% of you are doing that so far, so make sure you always get all the content, and tune in next time. I think we'll do like a quasi tier list. I know people love tier lists, but there is a few situational things, so I can't just like give things numbers because everything's relative to other parts of your list. So make sure you tune in next time, and thank you very much for watching to the end. Right, bye.